It began the day
There's
I
no
stopped by to
mom
return my
quite
friend's
like
jacket.
you.
He wasn't home, but his mom
Happy
was.
Mother's Day.
I remember her opening the door, sunlight spilling in behind her like it was framing her on purpose. She had that kind of beauty that wasn't loud. No bright lipstick, no flashy clothes, just soft confidence. A plain white t-shirt, dark jeans, and her long black hair falling loose around her shoulders. Her deep brown skin seemed to glow in the afternoon light, and her eyes, warm, calm, curious, studied me with quiet amusement. "Oh, you're one of his friends," she said, leaning slightly against the doorframe. Her voice carried a warmth that made even small talk sound meaningful. I nodded, holding up the jacket. "Yeah, just returning this. Didn't mean to bother you." "You're not bothering me," she said with a small laugh, stepping aside. "Come in. You can leave it on the couch." Her home smelled faintly of vanilla and something floral, familiar, comforting. There were framed photos along the hallway. Family trips, birthdays, moments that told stories without needing words. As I set the jacket down, she called from the kitchen. "You want something to drink? It's hot out there." "Sure," I replied, unsure why my pulse picked up when I heard her voice. She handed me a glass of lemonade. Condensation sliding down the side, just like in those quiet summer moments that never feel like they'll matter until they do. We talked for a while. Nothing serious. Music, weather, my college classes. She asked questions that didn't feel forced. She actually listened. Every word I said seemed to hold her attention. And for some reason, I wanted to keep talking just to see her react. Then there were the little things. The way she laughed softly when I said something stupid. The way she brushed her hair behind her ear when she thought. The faint crease that formed between her brows when she focused. When she smiled, it wasn't just polite, it was real. And that realness hit me harder than I expected. At one point, a quiet pause settled between us. I caught her looking at me for just a second longer than casual conversation allowed. Her gaze softened, almost as if she realized she was staring. And then she looked away quickly, clearing her throat. "So," she said lightly, "you're a polite one. That's rare these days." I smiled. Maybe I was raised right. She laughed again, shaking her head. "You might be dangerous with that charm." I didn't know what to say to that. And before I could think of something, the sound of a car pulling up broke the moment, her son returning. She looked toward the door, then back at me. Her tone shifted, gentle but careful. "You can come by any time," she said. But her eyes said something else, something cautious. And as I left that day, I couldn't stop thinking about how a simple conversation had felt different. Like the start of something neither of us had meant to begin. The second time I saw her wasn't meant to happen either. I was walking home from class when I noticed her outside, trimming the hedges along her porch. She wore a loose denim shirt tied at the waist, soft curls escaping from her ponytail, the sunlight catching on the sheen of her skin. She looked up and smiled. A simple gesture, but it had weight. "You again," she said, teasing lightly. "You sure you're not lost?" "Maybe a little," I joked, stopping by the gate. "Didn't think you'd still be working this late." "Garden doesn't wait," she replied. "Besides, it's quiet out here." I like the quiet. There was a hint of weariness behind her tone, something that didn't belong to her words but to her eyes. I stepped closer, careful not to intrude, and offered, "Want some help?" She raised a brow. "You know anything about hedges?" "Not a clue," I admitted, grinning. That made her laugh, a low, rich sound that wrapped around the moment. "Then you'll learn," she said, handing me the shears. Our fingers brushed for an instant, warm skin against mine, barely a second, but enough to spark awareness between us. For a while, we worked in quiet rhythm. Birds called in the distance, the faint hum of cars drifted by, and the sun began to settle into gold. She moved with effortless grace, deliberate, sure, the way someone does when they've learned patience from life itself. "You know," she said after a moment, "you remind me of someone I knew once. Always helping when he didn't have to." I looked up. Was that a good thing? Her lips curved softly. "Depends on what kind of help he thought he was giving." It was meant to be playful, but the air between us shifted. The silence wasn't heavy, just thick with something unnamed. She caught it too. I saw it in the way her hand stilled, in how she exhaled slowly and looked away toward the yard. She changed the subject. You must have someone, she said, glancing over her shoulder. Girls your age probably line up for you. I shrugged. Maybe, but none of them make time feel like this. She blinked, surprised by the honesty. The world seemed to go still for a moment, even the air around us. She didn't smile this time. Her voice was lower, softer when she spoke. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because she hesitated, then set the shears down and faced me fully, her expression unreadable. Because words like that can be dangerous when someone's old enough to know better. Her tone was gentle but guarded, the kind used by someone trying to draw a line without erasing the feeling behind it. I nodded quietly, not pressing further. But as I handed the tools back, our hands met again, slower this time, deliberate. She didn't pull away immediately. And in that unspoken pause, we both realized something had begun that neither of us could easily undo. The next few days passed quietly, but she stayed in my thoughts like a song that wouldn't fade. I told myself it was nothing, that she was just kind, that I was overthinking, but deep down I knew better. When I saw her again, it was by accident. I'd stopped by to drop something off for her son, who was apparently out again. She opened the door, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked surprised, maybe even conflicted. Her hair was loose this time, falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and she wore a pale beige sweater that somehow made her seem softer, almost fragile in that moment. You shouldn't keep showing up like this, she said gently, stepping aside. People will start talking. I hesitated, unsure if I should leave. Do you want me to? She sighed, closing the door behind me. That's not the point. The living room was filled with the low hum of music, something soulful, slow, the kind of song that fills silence instead of breaking it. She moved around the space like she was keeping busy on purpose, adjusting small things that didn't need fixing. You're a good kid, she said finally, her back to me. Smart, polite. You have your whole life ahead of you. Then why does it sound like you're saying goodbye? I asked quietly. She turned around, her expression unreadable. Because sometimes it's easier to stop something before it starts. Her words landed softly, but the look in her eyes said more than she wanted to admit. It wasn't rejection, it was fear. Fear of what might happen if either of us stopped pretending there was nothing there. I'm not trying to make anything start, I said, my voice low. I just like being around you. She let out a small breath, then smiled, the kind that hides more than it shows. You say that now, she murmured, but feelings have a way of growing where they shouldn't. Her tone should have ended it, but it didn't. It only deepened the silence between us, filled with things neither of us dared say aloud. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. The air felt heavier somehow, like both of us were aware of the line she was trying to draw and how fragile it already was. As I reached for the handle, her hand brushed mine. Not by accident. Not this time. The contact was small, brief, but it lingered like warmth that refuses to fade. Her voice was barely a whisper. You should be with girls your age. I looked at her, steady. Maybe, but none like you. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. When she opened them again, the wall was back up. The careful calm, the practiced composure. Go home, she said softly. Please. But even as I stepped outside, I knew it was already too late. The line she'd drawn was one we both had already crossed. Not with actions, but with hearts. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. It never was. That's what made it feel real. Her car had broken down just a few blocks from my place, and when I found her standing by the roadside, phone in hand, sunlight hitting her in that soft late afternoon glow, it felt like the universe was playing its own quiet trick on us. She smiled when she saw me, half embarrassed, half relieved. Guess I should have called a mechanic instead of hoping it'd fix itself, she said, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. I can take a look, I offered. I know a bit about engines. She hesitated for a second, that familiar pause she always had before letting me get too close, then finally nodded. All right, but don't blame me if it explodes. Her voice carried that teasing warmth that always disarmed me. As I leaned under the hood, she stood beside me, arms crossed, pretending to be uninterested, though her eyes followed every move. The air between us hummed with quiet familiarity, the kind that comes only when you've spent too long denying what you feel. After a while, she said softly, "You don't give up easily, do you? Not when something feels right." That made her look away, but not before I caught the faintest smile tugging at her lips. She turned her gaze to the street, watching cars pass, pretending she hadn't heard what I'd said. But her silence said everything. When the car finally started, I looked up at her. "Told you I could fix it." She shook her head, laughing under her breath. "You're impossible." But there was warmth in her laughter, a kind of surrender she didn't mean to show. The sound wrapped around me, familiar and dangerous all at once. Then, as if realizing how close we'd gotten, she stepped back. Her smile faded, replaced by that guarded look again. "You shouldn't keep doing this," she said quietly. "You're making it harder." I didn't need to ask what she meant. We both knew. I wiped my hands on my shirt, then met her eyes. "Harder for who?" For a moment, she didn't answer. The world around us felt still. No passing cars, no wind, just the two of us caught in something we didn't have words for. She finally exhaled, the sound almost trembling. "Both of us." She reached for the keys in my hand, but instead of taking them, her fingers brushed against mine again. That same electric softness, familiar now, but still enough to steal my breath. Her touch lingered for a second too long, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're too young to understand how messy this could get." "Then teach me," I said quietly. Her eyes softened. That was the moment she almost let me in, but she stepped back, breaking the connection like it hurt. "Go home," she murmured, her voice barely steady. As she drove away, I caught one last glimpse of her in the mirror, her hand pressed against her chest, her eyes closed, as if trying to calm the heartbeat she'd spent so long trying to ignore. That's when I realized she wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting herself. A week passed before I saw her again. Long enough for me to think maybe she'd decided to keep her distance for good. But life has a way of circling back when things are left unsaid. It was late evening when I showed up, not by plan, just instinct. Her porch light was on, a warm glow spilling over the quiet street. I was about to turn away when the door opened. She stood there, wrapped in a soft gray sweater, her hair loose, eyes tired but kind. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice calm. Not scolding, just weary. "I know," I said, matching her tone, "but I needed to see you." For a long moment, she said nothing. The night air carried the faint smell of rain, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Then she stepped aside and whispered, "Come in." Inside, the house was quiet. No music this time, no distraction. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a clock. She handed me a cup of tea, her fingers brushing mine briefly. That simple touch sent something through me. Familiar, steady, dangerous. She sat on the couch, tucking one leg under herself, and looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face. "You don't understand," she began softly, "how complicated this is for me." I sat across from her. "Then explain it." She gave a small, breathy laugh. "You think it's that simple?" "I think you're scared," I said, more gently than I meant to. Her eyes met mine, steady, deep, filled with all the emotion she'd been trying to hide. "You're right," she whispered. "I am." For a moment, the silence stretched. The kind of silence that feels alive, full of everything neither of us could say out loud. She looked away first, her voice trembling slightly. "I shouldn't feel this way. You're younger, your world's just beginning, and mine's already," she trailed off, unable to finish. I moved closer, slow enough not to scare her. "Your world isn't over. Maybe it just needs someone to remind you what it feels like to be seen again." Her breath caught. She didn't pull away when my hand rested lightly on hers. Her skin was warm, soft, trembling just enough to betray the calm in her face. "Don't," she whispered, though her fingers didn't move from mine. "You'll make me forget why I shouldn't want this." "Then maybe you should," I said quietly. Her eyes lifted, uncertain, but full of something raw and honest. Then she did something she'd never done before. She didn't move away. She didn't speak. She just let the silence exist. And, for the first time, she let it mean something. When I finally stood to leave, she followed me to the door. This time, she didn't tell me to stop coming. Didn't tell me to find someone my age. She just looked at me with a softness that said everything words couldn't. As I stepped outside, she whispered, almost to herself, "You make it too easy to forget what's right." I smiled faintly. Maybe that's the point. She closed the door slowly. Not like before when she wanted to end it, but like she was holding back something she knew wouldn't stay hidden much longer. That night, neither of us slept. Days passed after that night, but something between us had shifted, quietly, undeniably. The air felt different when I saw her again, heavier with the weight of what we hadn't said. She still smiled, still spoke gently, but her eyes, they lingered too long. It was a Saturday. Her son had gone on a weekend trip, and she was home alone. I came by to return something I borrowed. An excuse, really. She opened the door in a loose white shirt and jeans, her hair slightly damp, framing her face in soft curls. She looked surprised, but not upset. "I thought you were avoiding me," I said. Her lips curved faintly. "I thought you'd stop coming." "I tried," she sighed, stepping aside to let me in. The smell of vanilla and fresh laundry filled the space. The afternoon light poured through the windows, bathing the room in a warm haze. Everything felt softer, like time itself had slowed to watch what was about to happen. We sat across from each other, but the distance felt fragile, like it was meant to disappear. She folded her hands in her lap, trying to look composed. "You know, this is dangerous," she said quietly. "I know." Her gaze flickered to the window. "You'll find someone better, someone who fits." I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "I'm not looking for someone who fits. I'm looking for someone who feels right." That made her breath catch. She looked down at her hands, twisting the ring on her finger, a habit she had when nervous. "You don't mean that," she whispered, but her tone lacked conviction. "I do," I said, "and you know it." She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply like she was trying to steady herself against a storm she already knew she couldn't stop. When she opened them again, something in her had changed. A surrender, quiet but absolute. I moved closer, slowly, giving her every chance to stop me. She didn't. When I sat beside her, the warmth of her presence filled every inch of space between us. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "You make me forget myself. Maybe that's what you need," I said softly. She turned her head slightly, our faces just inches apart. I could feel her breath, soft, uneven. For a long time, we just stayed there, suspended in the quiet. Then, with a kind of fragile courage, she reached out and brushed her fingers against mine. It was the smallest gesture, but it broke something open inside both of us. Neither of us said another word. Her hand stayed in mine, still trembling, but she didn't pull away. She looked up at me, eyes full of everything she'd tried so hard to deny. Longing, fear, and something deeper, older, truer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper. "This can't happen." But the way she said it, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a confession. The silence after was deafening, heavy, charged, beautiful. In that moment, I realized we'd already crossed the line. Not with words, not with a touch, but with a feeling we both knew we couldn't take back. The afternoon light fell softly through her kitchen window, turning everything gold. The counter, her hair, the faint steam curling from her cup of coffee. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every small sound, a breath, a heartbeat, feel louder than it should. I stood by the door, unsure if stepping closer would make it harder to leave. She didn't say anything for a while, just looked at the table, her hands resting together. The same hands that had once brushed against mine and lingered longer than either of us admitted. There was a tired gentleness in her eyes when she finally spoke. "You know, this can't be anything more than what it already is," she said, her voice soft but steady. I nodded, though my chest felt like it was tightening around every word. "I know." Her smile was small, beautiful in the kind of way that hurts. "You're young. You have years ahead of you. You'll meet someone who looks at you the way you look at me." I wanted to tell her that no one could. That no one else would ever carry the same calm, the same warmth, the same unspoken understanding that sat between us like a fragile secret. But the truth of her words hung in the air, and all I could do was accept it. She stood, walking toward me slowly. For a moment, I thought she'd keep her distance, but then she reached out, fingertips brushing the sleeve of my shirt. It was such a small gesture, yet it held everything: the memories, the tension, the quiet affection we'd built. Her touch was both an ending and a promise to remember. "You've made me feel seen again," she whispered. "It's been a long time since anyone did." My throat tightened. I wanted to say thank you, but it felt too small, too hollow for what she had given me. So instead, I reached for her hand. It trembled slightly in mine, warm and hesitant. For a few seconds, we stood there, caught between what was right and what we wished could be. Then she pulled back, gently, not in rejection, but in understanding. "Go," she said, almost smiling. Before I changed my mind, I turned toward the door, sunlight spilling across the floor. My hand lingered on the doorknob, unwilling to twist it. "You'll still pretend this never happened?" I asked softly. She let out a faint, bittersweet laugh. "I'll try," she said, "but I don't think I'll forget." When I stepped outside, the air felt heavier and lighter all at once, like I was leaving something behind, but carrying it with me too. Some goodbyes don't need words to last forever. Hers would stay in mine, quiet, warm, and endlessly unfinished.